I also would like you to mention,
Yep.
please mention our lead sponsor, if you will, as we go, or maybe I should say that to Gino. Gino, we want to make sure you have the lead sponsor, Mortallero Law, mentioned, and thank them for being a lead sponsor for this program.
Okay.
And right now, that's the only lead sponsor we have, but we may get others as we go along. So that being the case, I am going to step away now that we're recording, so you don't have to clip that at the front. And we'll now turn that over to you, and you can have some chat over the next few minutes. Thank you.
So Brian, Natalia, how you guys feeling this morning?
Fantastic. All
Yeah.
thumbs up.
All right, questions are good to go.
It's a little cool in here. I can do something with air conditioning. Not bad though.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it. I love it. Let's see. So we're about a minute out from 8 o'clock.
Yeah, man.
All right, outstanding. Brooke, our attendees, we won't be able to see all our attendees, their names or anything like that, correct?
I see some names across the
Yeah,
top
you
right
can
now.
see it. If you
Okay.
click on participants, you can see who's joining us.
Okay, perfect. So those folks are currently live. They can hear us and see us. Is that correct? Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks for doing this too. Good. Got lots of good questions for us. I appreciate you.
No, absolutely, man. There's so much to explore in this space, right? Having gone through this process myself, like it perks your ears. Like you want to know, like when you're in the hustle and bustle and you're in the grind of building your company, you want to know folks that are on the other side. What exactly does that playbook look like, right? So I'm so thrilled that both of you, with your extensive experience, we're going to have this conversation today.
I'm excited too.
Perfect.
Good stuff.
Wonderful. Well, it looks like we are right at 8 o'clock. So in the spirit of being punctual and being respectful and mindful of everyone's time, let's go ahead and kick this show off. So good morning, everyone in attendance. My name is Dr. Gino Colora. I am the Secretary for the Business Transition Council of Tampa Bay, and professionally, I'm the President of Ultraviolet Living and a board member for CEO Effectiveness with Dr. Bill Anton. And just so incredibly thrilled and excited to have you all in attendance today. I mean, obviously we know new year, right? It's January Q1. Everyone is rocking and rolling and it's full steam ahead, but making the time for this discussion and conversation today is really important. And we're so glad that you did. Okay. So what are we going to be talking about today, right? And as most of you know, as you registered and read the bios of our panelists, what it boils down to is, what is it that buyers want and must have for a valuable business, right? So for those of us who are business owners, either we're working towards an exit, right, or we're at the cusp of having an exit, and having a very clear understanding, right, of what it is that those buyers are really looking for, having a clear outline and a blueprint. I think that clarity, right, on both sides is such an important thing. And the last education panel we did was the opposite, right? What are some of the things that business owners can do to prepare themselves, right, to be able to present to buyers and folks who are acquiring their business? So today's exciting, and it's exciting because our two panelists have so much experience. They're well seasoned, and they're going to be able to provide some incredible insight to you all as we take a deep dive into the nuts and bolts and the meat and potatoes of what it is that buyers are looking for in a healthy, good business. So let me introduce our panelists. So our first panelist is Natalia Kalava, right? So Natalia Kalava's got over 10 years experience in this space, particularly in the finance world. She is the founder and president of American Valuations, and of course, a member of the Business Transition Council. So Natalia, thank you so much for being here, and very much looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Outstanding. Our second panelist, Mr. Brian Stevens. So Brian brings over 20 years experience in this space, right? And so Brian is the owner and president of Legacy Business Sales and Acquisitions, as well as Legacy Business Brokers, right? So Brian, you're a busy guy.
We try to be. Yeah.
And of course, Brian is also a member of the Business Transition Council. So Brian, thank you so much for being here and offering your insight and wisdom and experience to everyone who is joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Kalora. We're looking forward to doing this. Hopefully it'll be great and beneficial to everyone. So
Wonderful, wonderful, fantastic. So before we start diving into some of the hardcore questions, I do want to take a quick second and let everyone know you have been automatically muted, right? So if you are tuned in, we will not be able to hear you if you ask a question. So if you have questions, please direct them to the chat. So if you look below your screen, you're going to see 5 buttons. There's one that says participants, one that says chat, share screen, record, and reactions. You want to go chat, just click that, add your question in there. And as we get to the end of the discussion today, we'll make sure we address those questions. And if we don't have time to address those questions, we will certainly follow up and have one of our 2 panelists get a hold of you to answer those questions for you. Okay, so, and also want to take a quick second and give a huge shout out to our sponsor for the panel discussion this morning, which is Mortellaro Law. So an incredible law firm, fantastic in the estate planning realm. We're just very thankful for them providing the resources so we can do this this morning and have this wonderful discussion. Okay, so let's dive into the good stuff. So first question, and I'm going to throw this out there, and it's because it's a 40,000 foot view question, right? But there's so many components and details that go into it. So what do buyers value the most, right, when scoping a business for acquisition, right? So that word value, that's that's a loaded word, right? So what is it, all right, that they value the most? So Brian or Natalia, please.
Natalia, go ahead and then I'll add some. How's that?
Okay, that sounds good. So from a very macro view, of course, any particular buyer can value certain things differently based on what is important to them. It's almost like a beauty in the eyes of the beholder. However, some basic elements from my experience, I could say do matter. So there are 3 things that a prospective buyer would look at. One, and probably one of the most important ones, is cash flows. Does the business make money? What is the capacity to make money? So we have to look at the business cash flows. Number 2, we have to look at the risk. So yes, a business can generate a lot of cash flows, but at what cost? What are some of the acceptable levels of risk and what are some of the unacceptable levels of risk? We have to account for those prospective challenges or threats that a business may face. And then lastly, and not least, we have to look at the potential for growth. So the business can be generating a lot of cash flows right now, but what if it's a declining industry, right? What do we do then? Those capacity to generate cash flows can go down. So we have to keep those 3 things in mind. 1 is cash flows, 2 is the potential for growth, and balanced off with the risk.
So that there's those are 3 wonderful components. And you know, something that just came to mind, Natalia, as you're providing that response is that last bullet point, potential for growth. How is it that you have seen, and we'll come back to the original question, but as a quick caveat, what have you seen as kind of a result of COVID, right? And everything that we've all gone through over the past couple of years, right? As far as growth, right? Are there some industries that are exploding, right? Where there's, you know, more of a particular niche or nuance that people are looking at, or has it been kind of even keeled?
Great follow upon Dr. Kalora. And we recently had a discussion with Brian's group of business brokers of Florida about exact same topic. So the answer is not everything was bad. Some industries have thrived. We can see the market multiples for IT industry, for example, skyrocketed. Overall, based on the current data across all industries, the operating profit EBITDA multiple, and EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization for everyone, just to have an idea. So that multiple is 4 times. So the operating profit multiples across everything is right now 4 times. Some industries were able to optimize their cost structure and actually have seen improvements in their margins and therefore have that better potential for growth or for even marketing their business for sale because they appear to be more profitable. So yes, some industries experience tremendous growth, others kind of chugged along, and others experienced a downfall, but now they're recovering. So I'm on the optimistic side. So I'm hoping that it did allow some companies to reevaluate and optimize their operations, perhaps trim some of those excess expenses and make themselves better. And now perhaps they're even better positioned to grow in the future.
That's outstanding. That's wonderful feedback, Natalia. Thank you. So Brian, bringing it back, right? So from your vantage point, right? So what do buyers value the most when scoping a business for acquisition?
And I love what Natalia said, because it aligns exactly what I see. Most of the people that I buy that work with our company are individual buyers. They're not the big companies. Our companies are probably under 35 million, sometimes well below that. And when I sit and I talk to people, like, what do you want? What are you looking to do? And why do you want to leave the corporate world or leaving the military or coming from another country to acquire businesses? I can almost put everything into 3 different columns, and profit is one of the big phenomenal ones. But there's also, if you think of maybe even Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's passion and there's purpose. And every time I talk to people, they say, hey, I want to do this. And it's really important to match that up. Why do you want to do this? And it's so important to say, well, I need to fulfill this need in my life, or I'm really excited about understanding different things out there. If you look at the story of Starbucks, they pretty much thought cups of coffee were okay to sell, but they're selling beans and grinders. And Howard Schultz said, wait, there is value in selling a cup of coffee, when the whole world knew that you couldn't make profit by, relying on selling cups of coffee. And so you align, when people align properly with the business, they align what's exciting in their lives, what they're going to study or work to learn how to drive that well. So that level that Natalia was saying about moving that forward is important. As a seller, you say, well, that seems like an internal thing of the buyer, those needs, et cetera. But I see when sellers do a good job, they explain why that business legacy that they're passing on is great. They have systems in place that say, I can minimize the risk that you're going to do, Dr. Kalora, when you buy my business, because I've got all these things in place and you can take to the next level. You're not sweating out the bullets of wondering if you're going to break even on your new startup company or new venture, because you're now taking care of your family and your spouse and your family and your bills, et cetera. And now you're using that ingenuity, instead of having, cortisol blowing through your mind every day, wondering whether they're going to make the bills pay, to now take that business to a whole new level and create the next Starbucks or whatever sort of thing it is out there. So that's aligned. And sellers need to be able to, I always tell them, hey, don't say I did this and I did that, but say, we did this as a company, and start thinking a holistic picture. If you don't have systems that are written down in place and you take them for granted, go out and hire a consulting company and create manuals and operations and checklists and that sort of thing, so that it's easier for people to take that to the next level and minimize those risks. So quite in line with what Natalia said, but I love that whole side. Almost everybody will tell me they like something or don't like something, and it's tied to more than just these numbers on the bottom line. It's somewhere deep in the heart and that spirit that drives us to make incredible business owners.
Brian, that's beautiful, man. And the reason I say that is because anyone who has started a business, right, and has put the work in and has gone through the grind, right, of being able to get a business to sustainability and then profitability, right, and being able to make that jump. It's an amazing thing that when you're so entrenched, the idea and the concept of having efficient processes, right, truly being able to understand what the playing field looks like to achieve push button, right? So when appealing to folks that want to acquire you, to your point, when they want to be able to put high octane gasoline on that company and take it to the next level, if that baseline, that foundation from a systemization perspective and efficiency perspective isn't tightened up, I absolutely can see where they'd be like, maybe not, because I have to assume that with the amount of companies, especially in the tech space coming out of COVID, that's one of the nuts and bolts for them, right? That's the whole idea behind tech, right? Is to make things easier for us, which means that they're efficient. So that makes a lot of sense. Brian, your thoughts from a COVID-19 perspective coming out, right, of COVID. Have you seen anything from a trend perspective that has affected what it is that folks value when they're acquiring a business?
Well, we're in a Florida market, so I'm seeing a lot of things. I'm seeing more people looking for great businesses that they're moving from Chicago, New York, what have you. For the industries themselves, it's opened itself up to a lot of different things. And I don't do much in restaurants, although that's one of the big trends out there. You saw some of the people, even the way we do business in restaurants, I'm seeing there's more takeout, there's more what they call ghost kitchens, there's more people that are doing delivery and that sort of thing. And it's changing that that whole interaction. What we're on right now with Zoom, the technologies of how we can connect. I mean, I love this room and this setup, and this is something we need to develop even better in the reality, because I'm seeing more and more mix of things. I've got neighbors that have moved down here in the last year, and they're still working jobs in New York, where they're taking that big salary and moving out of their house, but they can do this sort of thing and connecting it. So it's opened a lot of great opportunities. And I've seen some businesses do extremely well. We worked with one of the largest fishing and tackle companies in Florida. And in 2020, when COVID was hitting it, they hit a whole new high. And a lot of the valuation, we had to decide, is it going to stay there or not? But the new owners have said that what happened, and they bought this business, is that sort of turned on the button for a lot of people to start doing more outdoor things. And so people are doing outdoor living and buying more plants and spending more time together in nature and that sort of thing. So there's a whole shift, and it's in the most, I think a lot of good things are happening right now in that realm.
That's fantastic. That's great feedback. Thank you both. That was really, really insightful. So let's paint a picture, right? And I want to paint a picture of with the 30 years combined experience between the two of you, right? What does the perfect business to buy look like, right? What is that picture?
Brian, you want to go first?
Go ahead. Go ahead. You take it. I'll do this. I'll be the backup guy all the time.
I like it. Okay. So great question, but as I think Brian alluded before, there is no such thing as a perfect business. I don't know if you alluded to that or not, so I'm kind of making a jump, but in my opinion, there's no perfect business. It all depends what drives you or a prospective buyer of the business in this case. What is your passion? What is your why? And that may lead you to a different direction, a different business than what, let's say, would excite me, or which business would pique my interest. So I don't know if there's such a thing, but if there is, that's great. I think there should be a Myers-Briggs for selecting a business that's right for you, not just in terms of the skill set, experience, but also to account what type of personality you have. Are you an introvert or extrovert, or introverted extrovert? What will suit you better? What type of resources potentially you have, right? Because you can start a business, you can be very passionate about it and run out of cash very, very quickly. And you will run your business to the ground. So you have to have a realistic assessment of what you are able to run, as well as have an interest in running it. I'll give a personal example. My husband and I first started a business years ago. We thought it would be fun to have a yoga studio. Neither one of us do yoga. We don't really like yoga that much, but we just had a great location in Channelside. We thought there's no yoga studio in Channelside, so we're just going to do it. We did it. It ran for 6 months, and then we shut it down. It was gobbling cash, more than a turkey on Thanksgiving. We were not passionate about this business, and we had no business to be in this business. So after 6 months, we shut it down. Next door, another unit was bought, and they opened the yoga and cycling studio. I don't know what their financial statements look like, but I know that after at least 3 to 5 years now, people are coming in and they're still operating. So that's just to show the difference, that it was a wrong alignment, a wrong business, and you have to have the resources. So there's no perfect business per se. What's perfect for one person will not be perfect for another. And there has to be assessment, and there are tools. For example, in our group, we have Jenny Sutter, I think, with FriendNet. So I think advisors like herself can help somebody to match what's the best franchise route, for example, for a prospective new owner. But yes, but ultimately, it also goes back to the 3 things that I mentioned previously. Does the business generate cash flows? What is the risk, and what is the perspective for growth? Yes. And I can go on forever, but I'll let Brian now to add his points.
I feel like a bobblehead when Natalia's talking. So I got that bobblehead feeling somebody mentioned earlier, like, yep. I smiled when I saw this question early on, because it's the one thing I tell every buyer There's no such thing as a perfect business, so stop it. But I see, there was a saying about there's riches in the niches. There's riches in understanding those flaws, because the flaws are where the gold is in a business. In other words, and I use restaurants as an example because everybody has been to a pizza restaurant in their life, not because we sell a lot of pizza restaurants. But imagine a pizza restaurant doing $3 million a year and making $400,000 in profit. And you go there as a client, or you take your spouse there, and because you're thinking of buying it, you're like, oh, the service is terrible, the place is run down, the carpet is filthy, and it's still making this money. So if you can see those flaws, could you fix the service? Could you fix the carpet? Could you fix those things? And the power is, this is doing as it is doing if the books are what they are. And that's a whole nother question we will go into later on. Is it really making that money? But if it's really making that money and you can see the flaws, then you have to ask one other question. Can I, as an individual, turn that coffee shop into a worldwide bestseller by adding value and systems and adding different foods. I love the Starbucks story, so I go back to Schultz all the time. He's one of my superheroes of turning things into it. And so there's riches and value in finding the flaws, especially if you're aligned to be excited about it. And most business owners have, if you study Michael Gerber's work on business and stuff like that, they started off as knowing how to do something pretty well, and they've built a business around it. But there's usually a lot of opportunities. I talk to tons of guys that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and if you ask them, hey, what would you do to fix this business if you're going to be here another 20 years? They'll tell you. They know. And they say, well, why don't you do that? Like, I'm making money as it is. I got enough going on. I'm an old dog. The only last trick I'm going to learn is how to sell my business. I don't need to learn anything new. But new people can say, hey, and we just went through this with a delivery company, and they distributed all the flowers to all the racetracks and 7-Elevens throughout the state of Florida. It's amazing. Thousands of flowers, tens of thousands of flowers coming into Florida every day and being processed every week. And they were still doing the paper notebook check-in, here's a receipt. And at one point, they started talking to a coach, doing what we asked them to do. And they went to this technology where everybody had a handheld device, and they saved themselves about 20 hours a week in terms of processing, developing. Wow. They became more efficient. They saw where the sales were. They were able to track who was buying. They were seeing what stores had different trends. And it was just a phenomenal gift that they did. Those opportunities are sitting out there with tons of these guys that are brilliant operators. They're like, I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. New guy can come in, bring all that new technology out there. And those nuggets are powerful to see those flaws. You don't want a perfect business. You want one where you have flaws you can fix.
That's really insightful. So that's a great jump off point kind of into our next question, right? And so putting this out there, what are the most common things that prevent the sale of a business from closing, right? So you're up to bat, ball's getting pitched, and then something happens, right? So what are those things that can prevent sale of a business from closing?
All right, so I will start. My insights probably would be somewhat limited compared to Brian, because I mostly provide an indication of value and some of the risks and drawbacks that a business might have, right, that impact the value of the company. But I'm not on that transaction side. So ultimately, they're only in certain circumstances, I know whether the transactions went through or if it fell through. From my experience, I would say if the buyer and seller are way too far apart on the price, obviously the seller wants to sell at a high price, the buyer wants to buy at a lower price. If they fail to negotiate something that suits them, the deal obviously doesn't go through. Other things, potentially any litigation risks or something that they haven't accounted for, and we find it through the engagement, some risk aspect can definitely put the brakes on the transaction. But other than that, probably Brian would provide better insights than I would.
No, but those are fantastic points, though, Natalia. Thank you.
Yeah, I have lots of little sayings at my company. Communicate to be great is one of the key ones we say. And what I find is that if you do the communication early on in the process, we suddenly have an understanding of what happens to things like the accounts receivable, what happens to the inventory, what happens to that really cool rocking chair in the front lobby, that belongs to, my grandmother as I'm selling it, but the guy thinking that's a cool piece of it. If we set aside, and another factor are things like how we're going to allocate our taxes, how things fit into these things. And the more you do that way up front in the process and decide that out of the $4 million, $2 million is going to be for assets and $1 million is going to be for non-compete or what have you, these factors tend to not drive a business and drive it apart towards the very, very end, when you suddenly go, well, that's a big dollar and big factor. I love my attorney friends, but if you've got representation and they are representing you as a win-lose format, it's just not going to happen either. And I love the format of what we have to do, but as representatives for our clients, it's got to be a win-win. You can't eliminate, we talked about risk, Talia mentioned how, it's cash flow and risk are those two drivers of value for things. If you want to eliminate all risk for your client, the other person is generally never going to accept those type of things. And then other factors that may be out of your hands that you think about are things like we see, like a lot of, if you're leasing property, the landlord might have a whole different idea on what's going to be the new person coming into that business, or what the new rents are going to be, or maybe they don't want to give a long-term lease and somebody needs that for an SBA financing and that sort of thing. So getting all those uncomfortable questions way out early on in the process as you're putting together your asset purchase agreement and putting that together makes the world of difference. And those unspoken things, those uncomfortable things become more uncomfortable when you wait 2 weeks before the closing time to find out that you really have a major disagreement over grandma's rocking chair in the front lobby. Weird stuff like that has blown deals apart.
How often do you actually see that happen, right? Like that gap, that disjuncture, right, from a communication perspective, right? When you're right getting close to the table, right? How often does it actually transpire?
More often than we like, since in our company, a large part of what we do is based on, hey, we got to be successful to be successful. It's heartbreaking on a percentage. Over the years, I've become more and more aware of those type of things, and some of those conversations are uncomfortable. Sometimes they're even confusing, like, what do I got to fill out? No, 8594, nobody knows what that form is, but that's a tax allocation. They're like, I don't care. And then suddenly they get down to closing, their accountant says, well, here's why it was important. You should have thought of that. And they don't do that in due diligence. So we spend a lot of time doing that, but I don't know, maybe 10, 20% of the time deals fall apart because of that. There's a saying in our industry that somebody passed that deals fall apart 3 times before it finally comes together, and we go through those ups and downs in deals. And I don't know, that's not a scientific number, but expect those ups and downs in the industry, and don't go spend your commission if you're in a brokerage firm until the fat lady's singing and the checks in the bank.
You have one more item to add.
Yes, please.
That came to my mind. So I have seen actually a number of clients and prospective potential transactions that didn't go through because the seller decided not to sell at the end. So they get their appraisal, they decide, well, actually my business is fairly valuable. I still want to run it for a few more years, or for a number of other reasons, a host of reasons. Maybe Brian knows a little bit more what those might be. The seller just decides not to sell.
Yeah. I had this just last year. We had almost the perfect situation. A gentleman with an industry that in South Tampa, he said, here's what I want. We valued the business and we could have gotten him another $100,000 more. He said, I just want that. Here's my 5 ideal buyers. We went to 5 ideal buyers. 2 of them made an offer. 1 made a full price offer. And he spent the next month and a half tearing apart our purchase agreement that we've used for hundreds of deals, and finally says, I can't do it, and tore up the paperwork and said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I stay in touch with him. All my friends talk to me. I make them become my friends no matter what. But 4 months later, I got the phone call. Hey, you think that guy would buy the company back? And of course we made the deal happen. I sat back and I asked him, what happened? He said, He said, as I thought about it, he said, this is what I've done for 45 years. This is my life. I'm 74 years old. I said, what triggered you? He said, I had a mentor that's 5 years older than me in South Tampa also. And he died in the process of selling the business, and his 80-year-old wife, who didn't know anything about it, now inherited the business, and it's held up with all this sort of stuff. So you had this reality check. And I'll tell you real quickly, I do a little seminar on the 3 dragons that any seller has to face, tame, or conquer before they can sell the business. And the first one, I'll go into it real quickly, but it applies here. And the first one is, can you live with the cash flow that you have remaining in your life without that business? Can you live with those things? And I go into a bigger deal and keep it really short. The second one, can you live with the realities, what the marketplace is going to give you for the value of your business? Natalia knows that. We all joke, how do you value a business? Add up the number of owners and multiply times $1 million, right? That's what everybody wants, a whole lot of money, but it doesn't work like that. And then that third dragon, and it's especially deep for guys and women there too, but for guys, sometimes this is their life. I'm whatever. And this is my safety, my security. Those 3 dragons have to be tamed or dealt with or conquered before you can do the deal, or they'll pull you from that closing table all the way back to this whole garden. You're gonna have to walk through this whole process. I know I talk kind of weird about the process, but I'm big on the 3 dragons. So
that's a really good point, right? And from your experience, what are some things that they can do, right, to actually tame that dragon, right, within that process? What can they do to keep themselves in check?
Yeah. Well, the first 2, the first one is to speak with your financial advisor, realize your reality, and get with a wealth manager. That's why this whole process is ideally done with a team. The second one, and I learned this the hard way a couple years back with a gentleman who had a beautiful business he wanted to sell, but his nephew would convince it was a 7 times multiple. It wasn't. That his attorney wanted the win-lose only deal, and his accountant was doing things that we disagreed with. And I should have said, hey, go see Natalia or somebody, get a third party. Let's have a reality check on value. That's the reality. Now you can go talk to Dino or somebody else and have them work for the next 5 years to make this business more valuable. But that's the reality of your check. It isn't just what we did internally. The third one, that's more where you or Dr. Anton can talk about that inner work. For a lot of us guys, we've sort of made enough money. We sometimes we don't work on that inner work of who we are as individuals. And one day we don't have businesses. We don't have that. And who we are as individuals is it's some deep work. It doesn't have to be forever. It doesn't have to take forever and ever. And it can be really, really cool and refreshing. Almost everybody that sold a business has gotten through a process, but there's a process of regret and pain and sorrow. And then, hey, here I am. I'm taking my RV and visiting my grandkids and seeing the Grand Canyon and helping all this score and all that sort of stuff. But they need to sort of see that vision. So,
it's interesting, Brent, as you're saying this, and my wheels are turning, because I'm sure everyone who's tuned in this morning has heard this, right? The difference between working in the business and working on the business. Mm-hmm. And when you make that transition to work on the business, right, from a leadership perspective, though, it really does provide a lot of defining moments, right, within your own alignment or misalignment, and being able to recognize the emotional attachments that are involved, right, which cause that microscopic view when you're directly in the funnel that can cause inefficiencies or overvaluing the work that you're doing, because it's time, right? You're putting all this time in and all the blood, sweat, and tears. And that's the most valuable thing any one of us can have, right, in this lifetime. So it is such an important thing, that internal work, right, and being able to look within, to keep a regulator of sorts as you're going through that process, because I know it is a very emotional process. And so being able to have the discipline, right, to be able to channel that correctly and attain objectivity, and that is so incredibly important. Other friends of mine who are business owners, I see them going through it right now. It's, yeah, I mean, just completely blowing out the water what the value of the business is because of what it means to them, right? And you have to respect that, but at the same time, facts are facts, right? And if you have the right process, the right due diligence, and the right team, that's what makes all the difference in the world. Yeah. So this is a good turning point for us to talk about buyer's remorse, right? And this is something that I am personally very curious and interested to know. What are some of the challenges that can cause buyer's remorse, right, after acquiring a business?
So similarly to the previous question, I don't have too many newly bought companies, owners coming to get the appraisal. However, I would say slightly reversing your question, instead of saying a buyer's remorse, it's more of a starting a business type of remorse. I have seen a few circumstances. So for example, I have a client that was very successful in a financial sector. He also has a construction company. He built the largest noise barrier across the state of Florida around the highways. He decided to enter the CBD business and produce CBD oil. So he has ultra pure CBD something extracting system. Everything is the best, and he is producing incredible product. Well, he thought he can sell it to other retailers or resellers and do the white label type of scenario. As he entered this business, he learned this is not as easy as it appears to be. So some of those challenges that Brian was alluded to earlier. So now he's trying to be nimble and switch the business model where he would go and brand his products, go directly to consumer. The business has been losing money a lot, millions of dollars per month. So I wouldn't say necessarily even the remorse, but there are those challenges and unanticipated events that come about, and the business owner, especially experienced one, knows how to pivot. So I know that in this particular case, this owner decided to hire a marketing company that can help him to run Facebook ads directly to market that product directly to consumers. So they ramped up their sales incredibly, but their costs are still so high because they're trying to capitalize that, hey, we will retain this customer and the lifetime of the customer will be much longer than right now. So perhaps they will go back and repurchase and will have the low customer turnover. But in the meantime, it does take those resources to wait it out until the business matures, establishes itself, and can become profitable. So there are those challenges that in a new business, or I'm extrapolating, would be in a situation where somebody acquires a business and they just did not realize what does it entail to run it. And then you have to grow through those challenges personally, professionally, your identity develops and evolves along with it, or you just will have to find the graceful way to exit or ungraceful way to exit.
No, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Brian, from your vantage point, right? What do you see?
Yeah, from the buyer's standpoint, and Natalia, you're right. You're hitting. I can tell similar stories. I think we see a lot of people go through a lot of these same journeys. It's useful, by the way, if you're listening, to engage professionals, and there's a whole bunch on this panel in this organization to help you through the process of getting into business, buying a business, selling a business. Get a lot of help, because things will surprise you if you just haven't been through the process before. When it comes to buyer's remorse, I put it in maybe 3 different categories. The first one is the buyer's remorse external factors. 2007, I buy this business, and 2008 it is, or 2019 at the end, I buy this phenomenal restaurant, and 2020 brings us COVID. These are external things. There's a lot of remorse with those, and there's not much you can do about those external things except to be creative and make sure that you've got enough room in your world that you can say, how do I get through these times? Because that grittiness of an individual is going to be the things that makes it successful, but sometimes it's just beyond your measure. The next level are things like doing proper due diligence, and really doing your research about the company. Forget what the seller said. There's a thing called reps and warranties, and that's really important. But do if it looks too good to be true, find out what's going on. How are they making 40% bottom line profit when everybody else is making 12? Don't get sucked into the whole thing out there. And that's really important. Your due diligence, your research, hire a good team, hire Natalia, get an extra valuation perspective, hire somebody that say, does this make sense? And then the third one sort of is like that third dragon. I meant that internal stuff. I don't know how many people think that, I keep on going back to restaurants, and we saw a lot more than that, but I don't know how many people leave corporate America with a big paycheck from Verizon, and their dream is to own a big sports bar on the beach. And yet they're ill-equipped so many ways to run this, $4 million sports bar that they bought, and their employees are running are nothing like what they work with in the tech world, and this thing is just a total disaster, and they're really unhappy. And I say, well, why don't we find you a company that uses your skills, and then you can go to that sports bar on the nights you want to, and when you don't, you stay home and watch baseball or enjoy your spouse or what have you. So that internal part of, we think there's these big dreams out there, or these things, there's this misunderstanding that I buy a business and it's going to do all the work for me, or it's going to be this glorious thing. And it can be glorious if your heart's aligned with, but it also has got to make profit, and it's got to make sense for you. So those are the three categories of where I see people make big remorse decisions in their lives.
It's the blessing of the first. What's that, Natalia?
Let me add one more item.
Please, go ahead.
In my mind. We haven't touched upon partnerships. When two people join in together, they go into the business, they're wearing rosy glasses, everything is beautiful, they're on the same page, they're on the beach drinking margaritas, and then a few years later, the reality sets in. Two different people, two different worldviews, they may not be aligned. And I see a lot of conflicts arising in a litigation arena when they're trying to either buy each other out, or they're no longer on the same page, they're suing each other. It gets really, really ugly. And it's very good to have a good attorney upfront, discuss, document everything as much as possible to avoid those negative situations.
Love it.
That is such an important point. And I will tell you, on the CEO effectiveness side of the house, that is more often than not, we are brought in, right, with challenges and situations, right, at an ownership, at a C-suite level, that when you are talking about personality dynamics, internal growth, and the separation, one person's growing one way, the other's, and there's not alignment that is consistent, right? Because you get into the grind, you get into the hustle and bustle, and then when you don't constantly share the same end in mind, that can create a really big problem. So I'm so glad you brought that point up, Natalia. That makes a whole lot of sense.
Amen.
So kind of bringing it all full circle, and I really want to give our viewers some tangible items, right, to walk away with from this discussion this morning. So I want to ask both of you, what are a handful of things, right, business owners can do right now, right, to start implementing certain things to make their business more marketable for acquisition? So
I don't think there's anything that a business can do to be marketable today, for example, right, at the same point in time. However, I do think businesses need a plan. There's got to be, and we touched upon during this conversation multiple times, systems, right? You can be a key person in your business, but you're also a key person risk within your business. If you cannot step away and your business cannot run without you, it becomes not marketable. It increases the risk of those cash flows. If the clients, your customers will follow you, your business is not worth that much. So having the systems in place, having what I see actually, let me reword it. What I see in business a lot when I ask somebody for a budget or for a forecast, what do you intend to do in year one, just even 1 or 2 years? Usually I get a blank stare. So business owners just kind of riding the wave along, there's no planning, but it is very useful to sit down and go through the exercise of saying, where do I think my revenues will be next year? And identify those revenue drivers, right? Not just say, okay, I will make $1 million. How are you getting to that $1 million? For example, I had a new daycare center that recently started operating. So they were not at full capacity, but they could be ramped up to the capacity of having 100 kids enrolled in a daycare. Okay, so you have 100 kids. Well, how much are you charging per child per week? What is your cost structure? How much do you spend on their meals? How much do you spend on labor, on teachers? What is that staffing ratio is. Is 1 to 10 kids, or is it 1 to something to 15 if they're older, or 1 to 3 if they're an infant? So understanding that cost structure. So what it does is that when you sit down, let's say 2-3 months later, or maybe quarterly, if not monthly, or maybe even annually, if somebody's short on time, you can say how much are you performing better in comparison to what you have predicted, and where those shortfalls might be. So if you haven't enrolled 100 kids, why? Is it because of the geographic area? Is it because of the lack of marketing? Or if you did enroll 100 kids, but you're still losing money, why is it? Is it your labor force is more expensive than you thought? Are you spending more on meals? Maybe there are government grants you can apply for. So there's a number of things that we can analyze, but if we don't have the plan, if we don't know where we're going, it's very hard to adjust that direction. So I know that when you're starting a business, you don't really want to think about the exit per se, or if I meet somebody who says, oh, well, I'm just building business to exit it right away, you know that perhaps their heart is not in the right place. You do want to build it, but you have to build it in a sustainable way. So if you can't step away, it can survive and your baby can grow and create a legacy for yourself and your family. And also be aligned with the goals and objectives that you have. So yes, it's just creating one systems and then creating a plan, forecasting, budgeting, and working through that process. And it aligns with the team and the resources that you may need. You can identify, maybe you need to hire more people. Yeah, so it just kind of all falls within the same, what we have been discussing since the beginning of this conversation.
Fundamental components there, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Brian, how about on your end? What are some considerations?
Well, full alignment, Agor. I'm the bobblehead for Natalia once again out there. I mean, I start with, books and records. Have all your I tell everybody, put all your stuff together. And I'm not a sales. I've learned to be a salesperson, but I've learned the term time kills all deals. And when people are like, well, let me go find that, or let me find that backup. Get your stuff together well in advance. Put all the lease and the contracts and the details. Put a copy somewhere where you have access to it, in a vault room, somewhere it's secure, where you can transfer that information. And the worst thing in the world is to say, well, let me see if I can find that document that shows my financial normalization add backs for last year. I don't really know where that is. It frightens the heck out of everybody. I mean, it's a big factor. Systems and processes, and Talia just hit on that again. And we're just big on, if I can follow the rules, I can get the guidelines. First impressions make a big difference too. I got guys that have had business for 30 some years, and I sort of close my eyes and reopen them when I look at the desk. Bring in a spouse, bring in a friend, have them walk through your business and say, what do you think? And the faded, logos on all your trucks that you used to have, or dirty shirt on office, all those little things are part of that magic. Why not just spend a little time doing some of that outside? Because that's important. And today, your website, your what are people saying on that whole perspective? The first thing that somebody finds out when they sign a non-disclosure and they find it's Joe's distribution company, is they're going to go on the internet and search out there. So have those impressions that are really important for going through in the background as well, getting yourself organized, getting the right attitude. I don't know how many people say, yeah, I'm going to sell my business, I want to be out of here in a week. It's like, you've got this gigantic business. Realize that you're going to come with a price where you need to spend a reasonable amount of time. That might be a couple of weeks, it might be a year, it might be a 2-year, and depending on your business and the nuances and the relationships. If you have a high level of customer concentration where one business is representing 45% of your business, think through how you're going to spend that and do that. Maybe that's an advantage, but a lot of people are going to be very nervous if you lose that contract. And regardless of contracts, if the new person takes over and doesn't deliver the good service, then they're going to be very frustrated with that situation too. It's going to make them nervous. So there's a whole lot of different factors that are very involved in getting organized, communicate and be organized and help people understand how they're going to be able to walk into your shoes and minimize that risk by doing things in the right way. So I could go through a long list. I once compiled a list of 108 different factors that I thought were important, drivers of value or what scares people off. And some are very personal to the buyers, and some are just all straight generic, like Natalia was mentioning about earlier in what she was just sharing, but they're all important. So
Absolutely.
go get an advisory team and listen to what your people are telling you, man. You know,
Well, and that right there, right? The idea of having a team that's going to provide that raw, honest feedback, emotionally be prepared for it, right? Because there may be some things you don't want to hear, maybe some things that you're going to get very offended. But at the end of the day, if it's towards the end goal and what is you truly want, accept it with open arms, right? But it's a lot easier said than done. So that internal work, it pops its head up again.
Yeah.
I'll highlight something that you mentioned too, and it's important from the valuation perspective, is those normalization adjustments you briefly mentioned, Brian. So business owners should really try to control themselves not to use their business as their personal credit card, running their cars, meals, travel, entertainment, because it does hurt the cash flows. It's a lot better if I or somebody else, another professional, have to do fewer adjustments, because you have to do fewer justifications and try to explain, well, no, this was really my personal expense, or it's only a one-time cost. Try to show as clean of the books as possible. And it makes the business more valuable, and it makes the presentation better. And it just takes away that ambiguity that can be present. So it removes that risk element that we talked about earlier. So just be careful with those normalization type of items that would get added back, but don't count on that it will really boost your value. Better run clean books from the start.
Absolutely, Natalia. Absolutely. Well, that is fantastic for both of you. Thank you so much. What incredible insight, feedback, thoughts, and wisdom. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I kind of would like to open the floor, take a look at the chat box and see if we have any questions. If you haven't submitted any questions, please go ahead and do so now. That way we can go ahead and have our panelists address them. Obviously they're both incredible resources and know what they're doing. So let's take a look here. What do we got? Let's see. We're that good. No questions yet. We're that comprehensive, that thorough.
Come on, people, give us a hard time out here. We have these comfortable chairs. We're sitting in this office together. We're feeling good. Bring it on, buddy.
Oh my goodness gracious. All right, well, I'll keep it open for another minute or so for questions. So while we're waiting for that, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you? So Brian, what's the best way to find you? And if they want to learn more about the 108 reasons or want to get some insight right from you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I tell everybody, my phone number, my email, my website is all out there. Give it to anybody except for the IRS and the police, but that's because they already have it. Brian, and my website is BuyBiz USA, BUYBIZ USA. So you can put Brian and you'll find me that way, or my website, or type in BuyBiz USA and you'll find the one Brian Stevens out of the 145 that are on LinkedIn, YouTube, and everywhere else. But that BUYBIZ USA is a good trialing point. And reach out to me anytime. I love to share. I love learning. One of our 7 core values in our company is knowledge, always learning, always sharing. And I don't spend a single day where I haven't tried to learn something. I've enjoyed your book. I'm actually going through Dr. Anton's book once again, and enjoying that as my morning reads. And so I love interacting with other people, and sometimes I hear great stuff. Natalia, when she came to speak to the Business Brokers of Florida a month ago, I mean, just blew me away with a lot of stuff. And it's funny, you can take a course or read a book and then read it again, pick it up, and you're like, oh, I learned about 12 other things I didn't realize, and it's, we can only get so much at one time. And now we see dimly in life, and as we grow, we become better. So I love the interaction.
No, that's fantastic, Brian. Natalia, how about you? What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
My website is Amer Value, short for American Valuations, and that's AMER value.com. Or you can call, text, email. I can put my information in a chat box.
Outstanding. Yeah, if you could do that, that would be wonderful, Natalia. That way everyone has access. And Brian, if you could do the same, that way people can just copy paste and have that information stored on their computer. So, it looks like we're going to go ahead and bring it full circle and wrap it up this morning. So we'll give you guys a few minutes back to your day. On behalf of the entire Business Transition Council, thank you so much for joining us. We invite you and encourage you to check out our website. It's btctampa.com. We have some incredible resources on there from an educational perspective on top of our directory if you're looking for professionals, and of course membership. We'd love to have you join us if you currently are not a member. So with that being said, Brian, Natalia, thank you both so much for an incredible discussion. I was very enlightened myself. I learned quite a bit, and I know our audience did as well. So thank you both so much for your time and your willingness to share with everyone today. And so for those of you who may have gotten here a little late, we will have a recording of this webinar. If you want to share it with team members, business partners, we encourage you to go to our LinkedIn page, and you will see the recording get posted there, as well as our website. So take a look when you can. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Thursday, wonderful rest of your weekend. Brian, Natalia, thank you both so much again.
Thank
See you
you.
guys. Thank you all.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you, Dr.
Bye-bye.
Laura.
You're most